Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clockedin with me, your host, Jordan Edwards. I'm thrilled to have you tune in as we dive into the dynamic world of productivity, success, and stories of incredible individuals who've mastered the art of getting things done. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing at home, this podcast is the go-to source for inspiration and actionable tips to level up your productivity game. I'm on a mission to unravel the secrets of those who seem to effortlessly manage their time and achieve their goals. So if you're ready to clock in and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. We've got a lineup of amazing guests, industry experts, and thought leaders who will share their insights and strategies to help us crush your to-do list and make the most out of every moment. Get ready to get inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to supercharge your productivity. This is Clocked In with Jordan Edwards. Let's dive in. Hey, what's going on, guys? We got a special guest here today. We have Nimrod Vroman, a highly engaging Australian and Israeli thought leader and the new author of Prompting Happiness. Nimrod, how are you doing today? I understand that there is so much going on in your life. Let's dive into it. What's going on with you? How are you?
I'm exhausted. You're in the US. I think you're a few hours back. In Israel, doing a lot of things that are a part of a change that I'm going in my professional life and my personal life. I've left behind a very demanding profession, corporate lawyer for startup companies, and I started out a few ventures, a few startup companies of myself and other initiatives, but it's all apparently happening around reserves duty in the war that we've been sort of brought into, and I've been doing that sort of like this entire change while spending full-time reserves duty during the first 4 months of the war. So every week is different, a lot of unexpected things, and mainly physically exhausting. And then there's the challenge of just staying energetic on a mental level. That's what it is for me at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're carrying multiple jobs and starting things up. It's very exhausting and can take a lot of time. So, Nimrod, where did your journey start for you? Like you mentioned corporate lawyer. How'd you think about your career? How did that even start for you?
Yeah, so not everything was planned, but I I grew up in Australia. I was there for about 7 years, and when I was a teenager, and I came back to Israel just to finish off high school, and this is where I was born, and to join the army. My mother was is an army veteran of 22 years. She was
Oh, wow.
a colonel, yeah, in the army. She was a big deal there, and she wanted me to also have meaningful service, and I did as well. And I was very fortunate to join a technology unit that was adopting a new technology in the army. It was very much like a startup. The tech units in the Israeli army are very much like startup companies. They get this new tech and they have to make it attractive to the different consumers of this new tech. So either high command or the intelligence corps or the fighters on the ground, you have to make it useful for them. It doesn't at the outset just get deployed. So
Yeah.
my unit was pretty much like a startup. I was doing a lot of PowerPoint presentations there about how to go to market, morbidly speaking, but that's what units do. And we
And
did that.
and Nimrod, for the military experience, because in America, it's you sign up and you maybe are eligible and you go. What's it like in Israel? Because I know it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's mandatory service. If you're in Israel when you're 16, you get called up and you can't leave anymore until you're 18, which is when you join the conscription, you get conscripted. And it's interesting. You do tests from when you're 16. The army checks if you can qualify for elite courses or elite tracks. So I qualified for the pilot course, which is I'm very proud of that. It's a big deal, but it's also very much like a high percentage elimination course in a elimination reality TV show. Like 300 people start the pilot course and only about 30 finish it. So I
Oh,
got
wow.
kicked out. Yeah, I got kicked out unceremoniously after 2 months for being a crappy pilot. I was bad.
Really?
Yeah. I flew a Piper 10 times. There's this 3 week period where you fly a Piper in planned flights every day for 5 days, and then on the Sunday when the next week starts, the commander of the that stage in the reality show that is the pilot course, they come and they just walk into the room, and you've got your whole life ahead of you, and they say the following people will not be continuing in the pilot course and will be eliminated. After I speak your name, take your badges off and get the hell back to the main army placement area where you might be sent to the infantry or somewhere else. And they just called
Oh,
my name out after the second week. I got kicked out, and I was then offered. It's like a funnel, so you get offered to still go to voluntary elite courses. I could have gone to the Navy SEALs in another place, but I ended up joining this new unit that had new technology. So when you get drafted high up, you sort of like trickle down into the other units. And I
because
stopped at this high tech unit. Yeah.
so they're basically trying to find the most valuable people and then put them in their correct spots where it might be a value add to finding their placement. Interesting. What
Yeah,
do you
these
think
are
that
the
do you think
IDF
that's
is
good for the community? Like for the country as a whole?
absolutely. I think that, I mean, it's 3 years mandatory service. I'm not like I'm not a warmonger. I don't think it would be a nicer world if it was like a John Lennon type world if we didn't need armies. That's not the reality in Israel. Israel needs a military. Once it needs a military, what's worked for us is a compulsory 3 year service military, as opposed to like a mercenary sort of thing where you get paid for it. Now, does it do good for society? In my opinion, absolutely. I don't think it means that other countries can change their laws and start wiping out 3 years of adulthood for or young adulthood for 18-year-olds. But for Israel, it's worked because what it does is it it's called actually by the government from 1948 the melting pot of Israeli society. It's where all of the Israeli cultures meet and work together.
Oh,
And when you
wow.
look at Israel after the army, actually, there's books about this, really good ones. Israel has one of the lowest rates of normal crime, like theft and murder and stuff like that. Things that you might imagine might be prevalent in a country that is not always doing well. And there's a lot of stress here. Low rates of that sort of stuff, because people who might have otherwise not found themselves in society, they get professions in the army, they get jobs, they get inspired by people who had it better off in their early days. It sort of like levels out society. What do we lose by it? First of all, soldiers die every now and again, and that's horrible. And Israel has a lot of PTSD veterans, especially after this war. And secondly, we don't have very good Olympic athletes because people don't get to really hone their sporting skills when they're 18. They just have to go to the army. So we're not very good at sports. But the flip side is, I think that it's valuable. It's a valuable part of Israeli society.
Absolutely. We were actually talking about that at I went to a Muay Thai class this morning and this subject came up. And do you think it makes people more proud to be Israeli?
Yeah, 100%. And again, I mentioned books. There's a famous book about Israel called Startup Nation by Dan Senner and Saul Singer, about why Israel is very good at new startups and new technology. There's a second book that they just wrote called The Genius of Israel. And the book starts by showing three anomalies. Israel is number three or number four on the world happiness
Oh, wow.
ratings. The other 8 or 9 countries in the top 10 are all around Norway, like Scandinavian countries with no worries at all. Israel is the only country in a war-torn area that is there, and is the only country that has been climbing that rank for the last few years
Oh,
as well.
wow.
So they climbed from eighth to third. Second, Israel is one of the lowest in the world. Like, I think it's like fourth lowest or fifth lowest in the world in deaths of despair, which is suicides and overdoses on opioids and other drugs. And then Israel is also one of the highest in the world, again, top 10, and the only country increasing in life expectancy and healthy life expectancy. And the interesting anomaly here is that none of these rankings correlate with the level of stress that exists in this country. And you have to sort of like figure out what mitigates the stress levels here such that people remain happy and want to be alive and want to be healthy and never consider, doing the things that, by the way, in those Scandinavian countries, very high rates of suicide. It
Oh, wow.
doesn't change the fact that on the whole they're very happy, but high rates of suicide. So what does that? It's probably a sense of community that is very strong here. What creates the sense of community? It could be like external forces like global anti-Semitism, Jewish culture history, us coming together to Israel to try and rebuild this thing as light unto the nations, whatever. But really, what really does it in practice? What's the real kumbaya moment? It's when 18-year-olds, hormone infested 18-year-olds, spend time together in military uniform for 3 years, flirting with each other, and also seemingly doing something important and
Yes.
courageous. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons it's important. And with regardless of my opinion on war, I think that moment of melting pot moment of convergence is actually valuable on a societal level. Yeah.
100%. And the way you articulated it is fantastic because it's so true. There's so many people that do struggle and they're not finding their purpose. And a lot of the Scandinavian countries, I'd imagine some people might be bored. There might not be
Yep.
much going on. And that sense of community, that underlying is so key on being happy, healthy. They were actually saying that a sense of community will out, like, if you have a great sense of community, even if you drink, smoke, do whatever, you're still going to live longer than most of these
Uh,
people. Yeah. The loneliness thing
yeah.
is a real problem.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I don't think that means that legislators in Australia, where I did grow up, will come and say, okay, so everybody has to go to the army now for 3 years. It's going to be difficult to change those laws, but creating that environment is important. It may actually be a necessity in the age of AI because the things that take us away from a sense of community aggressively and create a sense of loneliness and boredom have to do with technology as well, just communicating through the phone, stuff like that. Then you have artificial intelligence that's just there to speak with you, not as a human, but sounding like one. You're going to be even more alone. Like measure the time that you're now speaking with GPT. Every minute that you add to that is a minute that you're not speaking and engaging with another human. And it just goes on and on and on and escalates. And I think that where that might end up is actually governments, if they care about their constituents, not all governments do, they might have to actually wrench it back by creating these situations of coming together. You look at companies, for example, during COVID, where they're working away from home, they're going to try and mitigate that or counter that by doing, when there's no quarantines or stuff like that, but just weeks together abroad or some, acts of, group stuff happening that wouldn't have
Well,
otherwise, yeah, been in the past.
100%. And the way I view that, which is really interesting, is some people think all times equal. I don't think that's actually true. I think if us two, say Nimrod came over to Tampa and he's sitting with me and me and him sit on the couch and we watch a movie for 2 hours. Like, is that time equal to me and him on the podcast where he starts explaining about Israel's perspective and all these things? This is a deep conversation. So, like, I think this time is way more valuable. So I think where you were going with that with the future is how do we have more impactful conversations with people on these different areas? You know what I mean? Because you're right. The AI thing, I used to have a guy who would clip up my videos and me and him would chat once a week or a few times a week, like, here are the clips, what's going on, how are you doing? Now there's a software that does it. Like, I don't have to talk to the software. It just does it. We don't have a conversation. It just happens. That's one less person I'm speaking to. So you are 100% correct. And then you start seeing these startup teams where they might do the work of what was 100 people with one person. It's
Yeah,
it's getting crazy. It's getting
yeah,
really crazy.
I totally agree, and I'm trying to ride that wave now. I came out of the army and I wanted to be an entrepreneur because of my experience in the unit. I built a company with my best friend the traditional way. The company failed. We couldn't raise enough money. It was a global financial crisis, and the idea was a bit too ambitious in terms of like a business model. It's not that important. when I quit, when we decided to close the company, I'd read the book Outliers, and it recommended doing something for 10,000 hours before you feel like you're an expert at it. So I told myself, okay, I don't have a good idea for product, and I'm not a techie. I have a law degree and a business management degree from after the army. Why don't I do 10,000 of hours of representing startups in a large law firm, see where that gets me, so that I know what startups are like. I was planning to be in the law firm for 3 years, and I got I was lucky. My first clients that I brought in were entrepreneurs, either from my unit or my friend who incorporated the previous company with me that failed. And they were all very big success stories. So my first clients in this big corporate law firm in Israel were became very big clients of the firm. My friend sold his company to Yahoo. He became then CEO of Verizon Israel. And then when they bought Yahoo, then he chaired a few companies to exits. Other companies that I represented also lived an entire life cycle and grew. And I found myself sort of like caged into the firm with these clients, but it was a cage of gold because it was very, I guess, it was gratifying to see the client succeed, and it was also financially, better than anything I could do outside of the firm. But over the years, I told myself, shit, you're staying in this firm way longer than you in the profession. The firm is great, the people in the firm are great, but you're staying in the profession way longer than you expected. When are you going to do something different? So I started dabbling in it about 6 years ago. I built a content platform for entrepreneurs just to mix things up. Then filmed an internet TV series for entrepreneurs. It's called Startup Confidential. It's in English. It tells the stories of 4 startup companies and their journeys. It's on the net. You can stream it. And then I incorporated a consulting company called Consigliere to start giving them other types of advice. I did that in conjunction, but everything was done in conjuncture with the firm. So I wasn't really
Yes.
out of representing clients. And then finally GPT came out. I start playing with GPT, and in the very early days, and I think
And
to myself,
yeah, and
yeah,
just for everyone's reference, it's Chat GPT, and basically it's run by OpenAI, and you could basically type in there, and you will never have blank screen syndrome ever again. Like
yeah. Well,
it,
when I started playing with generative AI or GPT or variations of it, which are what we call large language models, the thing that that writes like a human and answers you like a human, what I felt as someone who had worked with 500 startups prior to that and have seen technological revolutions, such as the beginning of the age of social media, when Facebook started growing and surpassed MySpace in 2007, and such as the beginning of the metaverse using the first VR and AR sets that I was taking in my companies. My clients were building stuff on these things. I thought to myself, that generative AI in particular, and the wide availability of AI in general, of artificial intelligence in general, is the biggest technological revolution since the atomic bomb. And
oh wow.
yeah, and I explained this to myself, and when I realized that that was the case, I thought to myself, okay, this is not a situation like 5 years back when someone came to you and said you should buy this Bitcoin thing, and I said stuff off, I'm not doing that stuff, and then I felt like I missed out on Bitcoin, whatever. That's not like that. Corporate lawyers in tech, they see a lot of these revolutions. I thought to myself, this is actually as big as the atomic bomb. If I don't do something now and commit to entrepreneurship now around this, I'll regret this for the rest of my life. And and that's when I went out on this path. And I can explain, if you're interested, why I think it's like the atomic bomb and not like any other technological revolution like computers or internet or all that stuff. I mean, if you think that's interesting, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we'll dive into that. First, I'm curious is how did you feel going into this job and doing these big deals? But in yourself, you said that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, even though you were kind of like these in-house counsels for a lot of these people. How did you feel about that? Because I know there's so many people out there that are living what they believe to be partially their dream, but they're not partially their dream. Like it's a little bit of both. And it's like, could you have reframed it to become happy in that environment, or what do you really think?
That's great. I probably did reframe it for about 5 extra years after the first three. Like I told myself that my startup practice is in fact my own startup. But in reality, to answer you candidly, let's say I liked basketball and I had a courtside ticket to every single game of my favorite NBA team. But the transaction was for this ticket that I had to clean the entire stadium after the game. So I'm not playing. I can't be a fan. I can see the game like as close as the coach can see it. But my job in this game is an abstract of the game. I'm cleaning up the stadium afterwards, the arena afterwards. Because lawyers, they don't actually create what the startup creates. They will enable deals by writing contracts about those
Yes.
deals. You can enjoy 5 straight seasons of NBA games like that. And I did, because the clients are great, entrepreneurs are great, the people around you in the firm are great. It's great. But after a while, you slowly become desensitized to what you're seeing, and then all you're left with is what you're doing. And if what you're doing is, if you don't find pleasure in that, and some people, great lawyers, by the way, do find pleasure in drafting contracts and actually tinkering with the law. But if you don't find pleasure in the actual thing that you're doing, then it'll catch up with you. And then you have to consider doing something else. And it becomes tougher if you were actually doing it well and you were getting paid well for it, then you're having to make a difficult decision. But yeah, you can certainly reframe it for a while. And you can also say, hey, I got a first class ticket to a great show, and I haven't seen everything there is to see yet. I can stick around and see more. The place
And
where the real tipping point, just to land the point, was COVID. There was a big bubble in high tech in the COVID. A lot of
yes.
companies raised a lot of money for very high valuations. And for me, that was a moment in time where I thought to myself, there's not a real connection between what they're doing and what they're being valued at. And now I'm actually not really watching a real thing. I'm watching a bit of a sham. So now nothing is real. Now I need to like think about something else. That's when I started the consulting firm.
Got you. Got you. And then how did you think about the transition financially? Just because I know that's always a burden on people. Were you always a saver? Were you just like, I'll figure it out? Have I done this before? Like, it's not a big deal. I just asked that question because I know people are like, so you just left and like started your own thing. Did you get clients right away? Did you get them before it? How did you think about that journey?
Well, I'm still in the process of raising money for these startups that I either founded full time or seeded. I released my savings and invested all of them in these companies, so I've got no real liquid assets. Got my house and then everything else is in this equity and high risk companies. History might say that I'm a madman. The skill that I have, like being a consultant to entrepreneurs, I could probably go back to doing that and get paid all right for it without these savings that I will have spent and gambled. I'm not so brave because I kept connections with the firms that I'm involved in to get them more clients and to keep and to manage my existing portfolio that's still there. A lot of people will give up everything and just go into entrepreneurship, and I really admire that. How do you do it? I think that there's a saying in Israel: just be the stupidest optimist you can be. Like, be stupid and optimistic. Things will get better over time. Gamble on yourself. Sort of like you will be able to fall back on something. At the end of the day, the stress that I feel today, even though I'm much more financially strained, is a happy stress. I like it. It's far better than the stress that I felt back then. So
Yes. Which is the two-sided thing. And it's like we put these there's these components where we put so much value on finances, but at the same time, it's like, are you really happy? Like, are you really doing what you enjoy? And is this something that you're happy with? And I know you got into this and you kind of like reflected on a lot of this happiness stuff. And where did that journey kind of take you?
so I just want to say one asterisk on the previous point. I do feel more comfortable going into this after having given putting in the time and the real grunt work on learning the space that I'm in and really working at it, like as a corporate lawyer, right? So I don't really encourage necessarily someone at the age of 21 or 22 to just say, oh, I'm going after my happiness and I'll get it right. Like, build some foundations with some real hard work and observation of whatever industry you're keen on, before developing there. Otherwise, it is, in a sense, potentially an irresponsible gamble. I'm going into this with good cushioning and sort of like infrastructure under it, and I feel good about that. Yeah.
And people don't realize that when you're kind of doing that, like a lot of the time you can do the work on the side, like you can kind of build it up, and most people call it a side hustle. But regardless of what it is, it's really just even testing the market. Like I've had clients literally go, I'm going to quit my job. And I'm like, what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, I want to start this business. And I'm like, what's the business? And they're like, well, I want to like tutor people. And I'm like, okay, can we do a quick pause for a second? And he's like, yeah, what's up? And I'm like, next time we talk, try and go get a tutoring client. Like, just get one client, like just one. And he came back and he's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. He's like, I started to realize it was a little weird. He's like, the clientele, because you get so excited about these ideas, and then we want to take action, but we don't prepare correctly, which I think a lot of people miss. And inside of our lives, we can create any life we want, but we just have to prepare and be very intentional about it. And that allows us to open up all these doors. Like when you look at Nimrod, you're like, oh, like corporate lawyer, what does that even mean? 500 different companies. That means he has so many different contacts that he could probably be the in-house lawyer on a majority of these companies if need be. And like best friend, CEO of Verizon, like these are all contacts that he can utilize whenever he needs to, if needed. Like it's never, you're jumping with 25 parachutes. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. And planning is the thing, and actually it really connects with the question that you asked that I didn't answer, which is like how I like really moved into it, is this situation where I'm playing with GPT, and just realization after realization. This is circa October 2022. So it's right before December 2022. No, October 2022. It's a year before October 2023 when the war started here. So, and I'm having realization after realization just fall into place. The first one was, this is as big as the atomic bomb. And I want to just say why. It's because a day before the atomic bomb, we were all humans living on a planet that we can't destroy with our own hands. And a day after the atomic bomb, welcome to a new world where humans can now destroy everything in one go, right?
Oh,
That's a different world to live in.
that's
And
a
then
fascinating concept. Yeah. Keep going with
and
the
then,
AI.
and then AI, I'm not talking about destruction necessarily, but what's the change? What's the change from day before to day after? Because everything else, computers, internet, mobile phone, everything else is an acceleration of a process that humans do anyway, which is communicate with each other and increase productivity. We do that anyway. Industrial revolution increases productivity. Trains increase productivity and connectivity. Everything is an acceleration of something that humans aspire to anyway. Atomic bomb is none of them. It's one day we can't kill the whole thing, the next day we can destroy the whole thing. What's AI about? So if we humans are defined by our communication with each other, like I speak with you, and the nodes that connect with each other, the humans that connect with each other, is a very basic element of humanity as a collective. A day after AI is brought out that passes a Turing test, that you can converse with it, it's like, hey, yesterday you could speak with 8 billion other entities. Tomorrow, after AI, you can speak with infinite entities embodied through this system. There's infinite entities. Not all of them are human. In fact, most of them, there's 8 billion of them who are human. The rest are just this machine that speaks to you in different faces or skins. So now it changes the whole way that we communicate. It's a different world. So that was the first realization. The second realization immediately after is that, oh, this thing's just going to do the job of lawyers and everybody who writes text all the time, like really soon. So I better do something. Better start thinking about other things to do with it or alongside it. And then the rest of the ideas were just folded into my book, which I started writing in parallel to exiting the firm and starting these startup companies. That's Prompting Happiness. The rest of the realizations land exactly on what you said, which is planning versus execution. So I think that what the main thing that GPT taught me is that the effort that we once in the past put on execution of any task will very much decrease, but it will not decrease to zero because the effort will have to increase on planning ahead of AI executing. So think about it this way. If I want GPT or AI in general to write me an article, it can write the article for me. And then I will not have spent 2 hours writing the article. However, if I want the article to be good, I have to prompt GPT for about an hour and a half, planning what the article should look like, what GPT should refer to, maybe having a conversation with GPT about new ideas for the article, etc. So I didn't really save the entire 2 hours. I may have saved 45 minutes. So I planned for about an hour and 15 minutes, but the result will be much better than what I would have produced with only 2 hours of execution. Right.
Interesting.
And that to me is the whole thing. It's now, that's why the book's called Prompting Happiness, because in this next world, I also believe that we do not engage as much in the execution of our happiness, but we have to engage more in the planning of our happiness and prompting ourselves to happiness. We are actually similar to that. And then the book ends with like dozens of self prompts for how to, sort of maybe become happy. So that's just to connect with your planning comment. It really channels into
No,
everything.
it's fascinating because so I ended up traveling Europe for 7 weeks in mid-March to early May. And when I went, before we went, we literally sat there and I asked some friends of mine who like traveled, like world travelers. I asked people who travel a lot. And then I went into ChatGPT and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go here for this week to this week. How long do you think I should go? Where should I go? This is my budget. What do you think next? And you start getting an itinerary of someone who's done everything. And it's this fascinating thing because you sit there and you're like, if I was to come up with this myself, like I'd have to research every country, I'd have to know every place, I'd have to do it. And it's just like, whoa, like that thing's kind of crazy. And
Yeah.
I like the prompting happiness because it accelerates that idea of instead of me looking for someone or searching the internet or scourging this, it's like, wait, let's see what this thing has to say.
Let me call and raise on that for a second. So that's a good way for planning your trip. Here's how today I do it with GPT. And I made this available for our listeners here, or whoever wants it. It's for free. If you go to promptinghappiness.com, that's the website for the book. You can download a document from there for free, no registration needed, called self-extension prompts. So if I were to go abroad and I wanted to plan with GPT, which I would enter the chat and paste into it a file called self-extension prompts that I prepared about myself. That file basically tells GPT in about 20 pages, 20 written pages that I took the time to write, that it is about to receive an endpoint task in one of my capacities. So in this case, it's my capacity as a traveler on vacation. That's the capacity.
Yeah.
I have the capacity of son of, grandson of, father of, spouse of, CEO of, partner at, author of Prompting Happiness. I have all those capacities listed in. It then receives, in this prompt, it receives a high-level overview of my values, hobbies, what I like, etc. It then receives an inspiration prompt of people who I admire, books that I've read, and I like, movies that I like, etc. It then receives another prompt describing all my capacities and another several prompts describing each capacity in detail. And when I give it an endpoint task, I say, okay, the endpoint task is in my capacity, as in my individual capacity, going on holiday with my family or without. And it's to Portugal. Now plan it for me. And now it'll say, hey, I saw you like the movie da 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 da. Did you know that it was filmed in Portugal? Do you want to go there? Oh, you're an avid salsa dancer? These are all the salsa clubs in Portugal. Now it'll not only plan the trip objectively for one travel, it'll plan it the best way I would have planned it for myself if knowing myself, but also having access to every piece of information about Portugal. That's where see what you've done. You've extended planning and you liked it with GPT. You can go this way, and then the trip is like going to be bonkers. It's going to be Portugal for you, for Jordan Edwards, right? That's my advice.
That's profound, because that comes back to our earlier conversation where it's like, hey, we have two choices. Like, we can have a regular conversation or we can have an extraordinary conversation. That's the same thing. I really appreciate that explanation, because it gets you really thinking about what you really enjoy. And like, say someone's a big Harry Potter fan, they're going to go to London. They're going to do the little train thing. They're going to do the whatever it is. And like, you usually have to think about that. Or if you're traveling too much, you're thinking about that last minute. Instead, it's all there for you. That's profound. And like, that's really, really interesting. So what you learn about happiness along this journey, going through all of this, going through the book and all of that kind of stuff?
So the book is structured a certain way. It starts with when I was having all these thoughts and it connected to happiness. I opened my diary from when I was 16 to 18. I had a diary with most of the entries in the diary were bullshit entries about girls that I wanted to be boyfriend of. And I was writing about it, or just flying from Australia back to Israel and what it meant for me as a teenager. Nothing really profound. The 8th entry in my diary is, I don't know what came over me, very arrogant. I wrote a theory for happiness for myself to instruct my future self on how to be happy. And this was written in the year 2000. And so this was 23 years before I rewrote it in the book. And I'm looking at this theory for happiness as I'm playing with GPT, saying this is a very instructional, structured, hierarchical theory. I basically defined 3 things that are non-negotiable, and all people should pursue them in order to be happy. And if you don't subscribe to them, get out of my religion. The next tier is processes that people should commit to change their identity. And there people have some flexibility, like you might choose a process of making martial arts a part of your identity, and I might make salsa dancing, and others might make yoga. And I had dancing, enjoying food, understanding how to make love or whatever. I thought that was important at the time. It is. And then there's other things, right? So those are processes that you commit to for about 10 years. And then the top tier is very personalized. It's what are the little wins that make it for you? Like, you want a good Nespresso machine at home, tiny wins. They could be tangibles, or they could be bucket list level things that you get. And I thought, wow, this is a structured theory. I like that, because that's actually how I'm prompting GPT now. I'm prompting it with what I call prompt funnels. I give it a general overview of what's happening and slowly lock in on the task. And then I give it to it, say, you're operating yourself as if you were AI 23 years ago. This is interesting. Let's dive deeper into this. And the whole journey there with this theory for happiness and with AI is journaled in the book. And it lands at the very end on GPT and me co-authoring a revisit to the theory of happiness, like keeping the pyramid structure, moving things around based on my lessons learned. And the lessons learned, where it ended up in the end, is that the 3 things that I don't negotiate for, I have to have no matter what, and I have to work on them the most, are maintaining and sustaining a positive approach to life no matter what, making sure that I create as many impactful relationships as possible and sustain them, and making sure that I can that I'm ready to overcome adversity with positivity, which is like keeping a positive approach. Those are the main things. I had money in that tier when I was 18. That moved into the processes thing in the second tier, and the rest pretty much stayed the same, by the way. So that's interesting. And then I guess when I was writing the book, I had to test out how I retain a positive approach. And the war sort of gave me a good stress test for that, because otherwise I don't know if I could preach to how to stay positive if I haven't faced real adversity. But the war is a good stress test for that. I've got good prompts to stay positive. I've got good prompts to keep my body healthy. I've got good prompts for money making, and very good prompts for relationships that are unique, that are not the ones that you're used to.
Yeah.
But the idea is to really break them down, because I think that today a lot of people, when they pursue happiness, they are laconic, and I'm not going to say lazy. Maybe they're too busy doing other things, but they're not thorough in instructing themselves to happiness. They're like, oh, I should really lose weight. That's like one level. You're not going to lose weight. Or I should really lose weight. I'm going to commit to one thing and one thing only, dropping carbs or intermittent fasting. It's not good enough. There has to be a structure to it. It has to be in the calendar. There have to be sub prompts to the main prompt in order to really change your habits. Um, Same goes for relationships. If you say, I'm just going to get married forever and we're going to be married until death do us part. Why? Because that's how marriages work. That's laconic. You got to do different tiny things to work on the marriage. And you also got to always stress test it by, let's say, for example, challenging the actual norms that apply to monogamy or to relationships in general. Think about them for a second and challenge your relationship the whole time. Break it down. I've got a lot of prompts for that as well. And the best one for negativity is negativity can come from within, in which case let's take care of our body and let's take care of our disposition. But when negativity comes in from outside, like let's say somebody's
The
attacking
environment.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, the environment, right? And so it's external. Then you see really where humans separate, like oil and water. You see the ones who will actually blame the environment for their situation, and and not only blame the environment, but assign malicious, nefarious intent to the environment towards them. So my thing is, I always reverse engineer the environment to its best intentions, no matter how terrible it is towards me. And I want to mention something. This does not mean for 1 second that I choose to not retaliate against the environment if it's coming to get me. It doesn't mean that. I might still retaliate. I'll still join the army for this war, volunteer to it, because I think that there are terrorists on the other side who want to kill me and my family, and they've shown that on October 7th. So I joined the army. But it doesn't mean that all I see is evil towards me on the other side. I managed to see the cause and effect that leads to where we're at. And what that does is it relieves me of this sense of arbitrary evil that might just come my way because someone is waking up in the morning and saying, hey, I'm going to be a villain towards Nimrod today. That's very unsettling. And that causes you to be in a state of stress the whole time. So that's the main prompt for retaining a positive approach, is to reverse engineer the environment to its best intentions. See what led them in the morning to what they're doing now. And if what they're doing now is irredeemable and it's hurting you, then, retaliate. But at least don't think that, oh, everybody's out to get me, right? So that's the one.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you really think about it, it's that's it couldn't be more true. There's so many times in our life where the people we're around, the things we're around, the stories we hear, the stuff that happens, it's negative. And sometimes you got to turn the other way. Like I literally walked into someone's house the other day and we were helping them with something and like their roommate was there and they were being I was like, "How you doing?" They're like, "Lazy or lousy or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, hope you feel better." And they're like, "I don't know why you're talking to me." I'm like, "Okay, I'm gone." Like I'm not going to be around that. Like it's just I'm worth more than that, and I'm just not going to be around that environment, and that's okay. But you
Yep.
have to start drawing a standard, because I think the thing I really enjoyed about what you were saying is the fact that most of society is not independent thinkers. So the fact that you could think through different ideas and be like, wait a second, do you really only have to go on vacation for 1 week a year, or does that seem like a silly idea to me? Like that's the conventional thing. But like we went for 7 weeks. Granted, was it a full vacation? Maybe, maybe not. We were working most of it, but like we would take the weekends to do stuff. But it's like you can craft your life in any way you see fit. And if you don't believe that, then hopefully this is your wake up call to say you can. Because the thing is, you're limited by your thoughts and you're limited by what you believe to be possible. And I just think there's a major component of that where you have to go and be like, I am going to make this happen. Nothing's going to hold me back.
I couldn't agree more. For me, that what that translates to me, and again, back like lands back on the book is a prompt that I call it. Let's like call challenge the basic settings and preferences that you live by. Like you basically were spawned into this world, into a program that has certain preferences and settings that you probably inherited its default settings from your parents and your society. You can go into that little window and say, vacation 7 days a year, no, off on. Let's do something different. Yeah, do that. Sure, they bestowed on you those settings. Those settings may have merits from the past. They made sense back then. Now go into them and think about whether you deserve a different context. Absolutely, 100%. If it's not in the criminal code, i.e., if you breach it, you don't go to jail, then it's changeable for sure.
Absolutely. Because if you really think about that 1 week a year, it's like, why was that? That was because air travel was so expensive. That was because there wasn't the ability to remote work. That what like all of these things, that was also like people were dying at like 40 years old. If we back it up 100 years ago, 200 years, like you know what I mean? People were dying earlier. Like so it's
Yeah.
like I'm not gonna like why would I go there? Like I talked to my grandparents and they're like, yeah, I've been Europe maybe once, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just like they're just like, why would I go there? Like it's just not like no. And if you don't practice these things, you don't grow. So I think it's more along the lines of like by constantly practicing, which I like about Nimrod is because he's like, I really dove into this chat GPT thing and was learning a lot about it today, which is important. You know what I mean? So for you, what's going on with the? And we're gonna try to finish up soon, but what's going on with the war? How are you thinking about it? Because I know that was supposed to be a big part of this podcast, but obviously we went a different direction. Because it is very interesting, all of it. How are you feeling about what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And what should the Americans kind of know?
So the 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 Hamas in Gaza, I'm giving a very
Very high
direct.
level.
Like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. Like I'm trying to be. It's going to be high level and short, but I'm trying to be very factual. The
Yes.
Hamas operates in Gaza from a finite piece of land with a finite amount of ammunition and a finite number of terrorist warriors who embed themselves in society and have done so for the last 9 months. These numbers of warriors and amounts of ammunition and the land there, that's depleting. So Hamas will be eliminated if we have patience. It is, however, the toughest war that an army, a conventional army like the IDF, has had to fight in the history of mankind. It's Mosul meets the tunnels of Vietnam it's the urban fighting of Mosul meeting the tunnels of Vietnam, meeting the willingness of the government to have all of the civilians in there die, the willingness of their leaders to have all of the civilians die, like in Stalingrad, like the Russians would let everybody in Stalingrad die to not have the Nazis progress. So that is what the IDF is meeting. within that space, the IDF has to operate under, in accordance with international law and subject to the scrutiny of the entirety of humanity. But it is doing so to the best of its ability, and it has depleted Hamas by about 50 or 60% of their good warriors, the ones who weren't cowardly enough to just stay behind. The rest of them are staying behind in a very cowardly manner, mind you. And that's why when their commanders go out, like Mohammed Def, their second in command, they go out sometimes with a lot of civilians around them, and they're going to just end as an organization the way that we know it. There still may be the name and the brand, but that's going to finish. The question is, what do we do afterwards? How do we create a situation where we, Israel, because we only control ourselves in a situation, do not neglect this strip of land just because the enemy came out of there, and do not find a way to use an international coalition to build something there that will give the remaining 1.95 or 1.9 million people who are there hope to not live in peace. Forget peace for a second. When people talk in peace or two-state solution, then they say, oh, that's not going to happen, so let's do the other thing, which is just create madness. No. How do we buy 20 years of silence? If we can buy 20 years of silence, let me tell you something about humans. Even, I'm saying this cynically in a sense, even fundamentalists, right? When you give them 20 years of peace and quiet, they're not going to want to change their situation after 20 years. We need silence for 20 to 25 years. And we need to give people hope enough to do that and maybe pour some money at that. If we give them money, as governments did before this war, and then neglect them, they will build tunnels and create this wacky horror story version of Home Alone, which they had prepared for us in Gaza now. We have to really be active in buying this, not peace, buying quiet for 20 years, because then things will change. Now, all of this happens in Gaza. In the meantime, there is a very big chess game happening between Israel and Lebanon, Hezbollah, and that game transcends to the West, United States and Europe, and up to Iran, and from Iran, probably up to Russia. And from Russia, probably all the way to China. There is something global going on here. Are we getting to the friction point of an explosion there? I'm not so sure. I think both parties have sort of showed their cards, in a sense, during this back and forth in the North. And both parties are like, okay, let's not let this escalate right now. It might be a bit bad. Now that could change in a second. At the end of the day, World War I started with an assassination of some dude in Austria, the Archbishop. It can go sideways fast. But I think that's the Northern Front is a part of a much bigger global thing. Everybody should care about the Northern Front. And Hamas wanted to start that global thing, but they prematurely did their thing, and now they're having all of Gaza paying for it, unfortunately, for them.
Wow,
yeah.
That's profound.
So now it's like a bit more peaceful. Peaceful is tough. We're losing soldiers every day. There's a lot of people dying every day, but the actual ground offensive and maneuvering has stopped in a sense. And it's more a matter of eliminating the remaining Hamas operatives, and they're not getting more because we own the border with Egypt that was blocked. That nobody wanted us to go in there because they thought that we'd kill a lot of civilians. At the end of the day, the civilians over there are tired, and they do not like Hamas. The people who think they'll cause you to support this war by telling you that all of the civilians in Gaza like Hamas, so Israel has to be aggressive with Gaza. That does no. Actually, I like what we're doing in the south of Gaza because I know that they don't support Hamas, because I know that they've had enough, they're tired, and when we told them to ship out of Rafah, they just shipped out of Rafah. And when we walked in there, the Hamas operatives who were very threatening in the first part of the war, 9 months ago, the ones who are waiting in Rafah are tired as hell. They haven't received any commands from their commanders who have been incommunicado for months because they're hiding in the tunnels. So they just said, stuff it. We're not even doing much to face the Israeli soldiers. And they walked away and embedded themselves in society. And that's how you own that. that strip of land now, and you create a situation where it is a finite amount of ammunition, it is a finite number of terrorists, and nobody's coming in through Egypt anymore.
Yes.
So that's it there.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing because it gives me a lot more
Pleasure.
perspective and everyone listening more perspective. So, Nimrod, where can people learn more about your book? Where can they learn more about you? Where's that best place?
So thank you very much for this. Conversation was, I loved it. It was really nice talking to you about it all. Prompting Happiness is on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. And there is a website for it, promptinghappiness.com. And my handles are Nimrod Vroman on Instagram and Nimrod Vroman on LinkedIn. I'm not very sophisticated in that regard. And I went off of X or Twitter when the war started because I was horrified by it. So I'm only on IG and LinkedIn. That's it.
Absolutely. I'm not on Twitter either, really. It's a
Yeah,
little too negative for
a
me.
little too much. Yeah. Funny
Absolutely.
story. Funny story. Just last thing about Twitter.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a sandbox for one of the first AIs that was issued in 2016. The AI was called Tay. It was issued by Microsoft. And they opened a Twitter account for this AI, and the AI used only the X data set, the Twitter data set, as its data set. So it started out the first day saying, "Hey, I'm Tay. I'm ready to answer all your questions." And within 24 hours, because of the trolls in Twitter and the conversation there, it became a raging Nazi Ku Klux Klan member and just said, "Good morning, everyone. Let's kill all the Jews.
Oh my
Lesbians suck."
God.
It just opened like that because it learned from that database. So that's why I'm off X. But I
Yeah.
love Musk, and he's in business wise, and he's mentioned in the book a lot. So look out for that. I like what he likes about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I like what he's doing with his AI that nobody's talking about called Grok.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
watch out for that.
Appreciate the time. Thank you for reaching the end of the podcast. For that, we'll give you a complimentary coaching session in the link below with Edwards Consulting. Hope to see you there and have a great day and keep clocking in.